Atelier Resleriana the Red Alchemist and White Guardian came out September 2025. If you're confused, a different Atelier game came out earlier this year, it did. That was Yumiya. They released two mainline titles in the same year. I don't know, perhaps more the merrier, you know? This is a follow-up to Atelier Resleriana for Alchemy and Polar Night Liberator. It was a mobile title that you only have played first, but also you can't because the worldwide version is now defunct. But the games do share the same setting, with characters from Resleriana showing up, with the mobile game at least, showing up, and although they aren't super important to the narrative of this entry, it does explain some things why it feels like some characters kind of show up and then leave the game soon after, and also means all of the characters from previous entries already have essentially locales with stuff that they already do within the setting and don't need to be introduced one by one on what they need to do. Right off the bat, you're able to pick between one of the two main characters, whether Rias or Slade, and while the main story will play out the same, it mostly changes the opening bits, show you their motivation immediately as opposed to learning it later, and also when characters are first introduced, you'll see their POV of their first impressions of the other characters, including their first impressions of each other when they meet up. Both Rias and Slade want to explore the ruins within the town of Halfine in order to find out what happened 12 years ago, where this red mist suddenly showed up. Monsters appear to cause great devastation to the town, and a lot of the people who lived in the town suddenly all went missing. And like I said, their motivations for doing so are unique to each other, but the main thing is they decide to work together to have the same goal. On top of the fact that Rias is able to use the Alchemist Cauldron, which Slade cannot, but Slade has the Geist cores that are needed in order to open dimensional paths. So each of them brings something that they wouldn't be able to do just by themselves. And while Slade is emphasized to be more the combat person and promises to protect Rias, it's not as if Rias herself is a slouch when it comes to combat, but I'll talk about that later. While Rias is able to use the cauldron, it's not until Resna from the mobile game actually comes in to essentially encourage her on her path to becoming an alchemist in order to find the pursuit of what happened 12 years ago to the town. And while Resna does appear early on, she's kind of a non-factor in this game's narrative. Like, she's here to help motivate Rias to become an alchemist, but she basically leaves the story for 90% of it, which I would be fine with. It wasn't for the fact they then also made like $17 DLC with her as a party member, so it's like, pick one. Is she going to be part of this journey, or is she going to be just off to the side? Because it's weird to put her off to the side and then go, hey, here's post-launch DLC, we can have her as a party member. Like, pick one. Like I mentioned earlier, you do have many characters from previous entries who show up, with the ones who join your party being Rage from Alchemy 2, Wilbo from Atelier Asha, Totally from Atelier Totally, and Sophie from Atelier Sophie. Many people sometimes complaints about the fact of the party being comprised of 4 mages, which it isn't, because Rias herself is not a mage, she's a more physical person. But some people have the fact that they're 3 alchemists, but considering the rules of the world are different from ones where the game's characters come from, Sophie and Totally can't exactly do alchemy in the same way Rias does, so while they can help her when it comes to figuring out alchemy, they can't necessarily do it for her kind of thing, or really do it themselves in this world and have different things they do when it comes to what they do within this world, but that's more so in the mobile game than here. But the fact when it comes to characters who don't join the party, they do have a lot of side events to interact with not only characters from their own game, but characters from all over the franchise and everything. And these side events do help to give them moments of shine, on top of giving them all little side quests that, when the side quests aren't grand, it does unlock a feature later on where they can also get certain resources for you. So it also, once again, it gives more purpose to help assist Rias and Slade, even if they are not party members themselves. And they are all treated with a big name card when they first pop up. Although it can be weird when certain characters will just go into basically cliff notes of their whole game's narrative, but some characters it feels like they try their best to avoid giving too much information. So it's very different when it comes to how much information the characters are allowed to have when it comes to the fact of talking about their entries and everything. The dimensional paths are basically what's on the tin. Basic portals that take the characters to different locales and getting materials and resources that are not of their world. And while they are pretty basic, they're essentially just dungeons you go through, once again, they are emphasized to be completely different places from where Rias and Slade are actually from, and the characters highlight that find materials they gain from it, and how other characters require you to go to those places for some of their side quests or to get resources or to be able to synthesize certain things. Half-Life is also in a state of disrepair because of the incident that happened 12 years ago, constantly struggling to get financial support from the capital in order to rebuild. So as part of also going to dimensional paths, you also have Rias and Slade running Rias' grandfather's shop, Mistletoe Miscellaneous, in order to further generate support for Halfine by bringing in people to pretty much spend to support the town, but also helping expand the place by bringing in more people thanks to the items you make through alchemy. So that's also a key important part, is trying to rebuild the town on top of trying to figure out what happened 12 years ago. Overall, I do enjoy the narrative of the game, especially how they give the characters who aren't in the main party a chance to interact with everyone, although it does feel like at times the main mystery takes a backseat just because there's a lot of stuff going on top of the fact there are moments where the game gives you a segment where it's like, oh, the character L is currently translating stuff, so you need to do certain things or to pass the time. It becomes weird in those instances, especially since this sort of can feel like going to dimensional paths and not much is getting done, at least until later halves of the game, where things start unraveling. On top of the fact that I mentioned earlier, there are certain characters who I found out are from the mobile game who do show up, but end up not mattering much to the narrative, but it feels weird how main story scenarios were focused on them, only for them to just leave. I guess if I played the mobile game, which you can't anymore, at least not internationally, I feel like I get more out of it, but it just feels weird to include them as a main scenario moment then, rather than a side quest. Now for the gameplay with you going to dimensional paths, that serves as your dungeons. While dimensional paths aren't anything complicated to go through, they definitely fulfill their purpose, especially when it comes to resource gathering and everything. Top of the fact they can have little events such as field bosses you can go after, or needing to find a key in order to open a barrier, or just getting stuck in a trap room. There's not anything too complicated to them, so I can understand they feel like they get very samey gameplay wise, considering they're different elemental versions of the locales they're going through. But after going through the pathway, you do have also a small hub area as well that they lead to, so there is even more exploration you can do around the world in order to get material. And just rinse and repeat, and honestly, I do enjoy the rinse and repeat process this game has because it makes it simple to do, especially when you get into the main thing of alchemy. Oh boy, I spent a long time doing alchemy because when it comes to this game's version, the main gimmick is the color system, where essentially each item has a color and you need to essentially match the colors in order to transfer the traits over into the items you're making. Can you just ignore that? Sure, but you're not making the most efficient item now, are you? Still, you have to pay attention to that, but later on, there are resources that allow you to change the color of the item in order to make it so that way it's easier to make the synthesis you're trying to do, or even just change what type of item it even is to begin with in case you don't have the right color. Let's say you need, let's say, red to purple. You don't have one? Well, let's say you just turn into a different item that you do have red to purple for. Boom, done, simple as that. You also have recipe morph, which is certain items in a recipe can be added in to change what the item becomes, because several items have a branch when it comes to their synthesis formula. And I love the fact that even if you don't know what the item is, you can essentially guess it and get the recipe morph, or you may unlock a hint where you have what the item looks like in the name, but not exactly for complete details. So you can still try to figure out what it is and do the recipe morph that way. You can also just recipe morph multiple times in one process if you essentially know all the items you need to further and further the recipe and keep going. Granted, doing it that way, you're going to be skipping certain items, but you unlock the recipe for it, so you can go back for it later if you want. While you do get a lot of your materials from the dimensional paths, you can also get materials from the various shops in Halfine, and by further restoring the town, by increasing popularity and everything, you do also have more and more stuff you can buy, or recipes from the merchants you can now buy in order to create more and more stuff. Although there are moments where the game will tell me this thing I can try and make, but turns out I can't make it yet because I don't have access to gain the resource. So just because you can see the recipe morph as an option thing in your status guide doesn't necessarily mean that you have the means of getting an item just yet, and that tripped me up. I'd be searching frantically going, where can I find this? Where can I find this thing? Within the Atelier, there's also fairies who you can have to essentially replicate stuff for you that you've made, or also refill your item stock that you use for combat items. And with the dimensional paths, you can just find the fairies to recruit them, and also give you passive buffs throughout the dimensional paths in order to essentially either get you certain items that you'll find, increase the level of them, maybe just heal your party, whole bunch of stuff, as you can also then hire them for your shop, or for upgrading stuff, because you can also upgrade your items in the Atelier, with Slade having these Geist cores that are needed to open dimensional pathways, but can be used to upgrade your items. Granted, only found one of the Geist cores he has actually useful for upgrades, but it allows you to really amp up any item you have, although it's very costly to do so. So you definitely want to be upgrading your items to get the most out of them. But you can only upgrade them once, because you upgrade them again, the boost you gave it will essentially go away. So you can only essentially have one form of upgrade, so make sure you're choosing wisely. You also have the shop that I mentioned earlier, which you can manually stock the items, or use the auto button that can go sort through sale price, or also just different categories, because there's different kind of people that you're selling items to, so you need to boost those or to help increase the town restoration level. One thing that gives to really note well is the fact that each category will have a level cap you need to unlock, and while the game at points will say to increase town restoration to a certain level, it fails to mention the fact that you need to first go to essentially the town HQ and do essentially these tasks that require handing over certain items, and then that will then increase the level cap so you can go back to your shop and then run through your business, and then you can increase the level of the town further. It is one of those odd things that I've been scratching my head on why things weren't progressing, but that's because I was focusing on the level of the shop itself, which furthering it will increase what kind of decorations you can buy, which can increase how much money you get depending on how you decorate the shop. But it's the fact that the town level is what's very much more important, because that's what brings in more people, that's what upgrades the town, that's what does everything, as well as the game had a better way of pointing out that those small tasks to just basically gather resources for people was what you needed to do in order to increase the level cap, and not just have the quest marker over your shop where you can't increase the level cap, you can only gain XP for the town. Despite how complex it tries to make the shop system sound, it's really not. You can generally just have it automate itself, like I said, using the autofill stuff. Like I said, you can manually pick stuff, but honestly, I started doing that and realized, why am I doing this? Especially since you can just immediately have the auto pick items that fulfill certain criteria for each type of customer. Yes, there are certain tasks you can also fulfill in the shop by putting certain items to gain more EXP for the shop, but like I said, that's more for decorations and actual progress, so while you can do that, I just don't really bother much with the decorations, because I don't really find the amount of money it increases generates more really that substantial to really be a big focus. You also have quests you can take from the HQ. I mentioned earlier the ones that just gathering stuff or increase the level cap. The other quests are all basically find a certain monster or a certain type of enemies and just kill it. Whether it be kill 10 of 2 different types of enemies, or find a certain boss enemy roaming around and go after it. And you can repeatedly do the mission over and over if you want to, just for the rewards. Although one thing that's weird is the fact that there's a cap of how many requests you can take on at once, which honestly I don't know why, especially since, like I said, most of them are just find 10 of this thing and kill it. So I feel like something you can just carry all of them and just casually do them. But just the fact that you can switch your quest marker to those quests to make it easier to find out which locale they're in, especially as every locale has different monsters depending on if it's during the day or during the night. Now for the game's combat, and oh boy, they did a lot for the combat in this entry. So the basic stuff is just a normal attack, your skills, which you can use by spending AP, but you refill the AP by primarily doing basic attacks, and you can upgrade the characters to gain more basic attacks they can do per turn, so you can refill faster. But then we start incorporating mechanics from previous entries, like the fact you have the front row and the back row, with the fact that you can switch out people from the front row to the back row. But when you do this, it essentially has both of them attack within the same turn and everything. So you can essentially double up on a turn at the cost of now swapping out people from the front and the back. Later on, this gets upgraded to where you can essentially tag in 3 people. Once again, one person will still be swapped out from the front and the back, but then an extra person helping out in the fight. Swapping back and forth, if you're using 2 items, is also able to do dual mixes, where depending on the items used, you can essentially add an extra effect to them. Like I said, it all depends on the combination, but it's another mechanic that is brought over here and adds more and more to where you want to synthesize more powerful items, because with the right combination, you can do more powerful stuff where you have the characters swap between places. But if you have characters together in the front row, then when it comes to their turns, let's say if Rhys attacks first, she will then do an assist attack when Slade goes afterwards and stuff like that. So even the front row people can have extra people supporting them. But if I notice, it's only if you essentially hit the enemy first when you start the encounter, because if the enemy touched you first, then this mechanic doesn't trigger. But it's an even extra thing where the characters will help each other from the front row as well. And if you're switching a lot, you can make it to where 2 characters will assist someone after their attack. And let's just say the amount of stuff you can have characters do just from the front row and assisting gets super ridiculous, and I love it. You also have an active guard system where you can block attacks at the right timing. There is an option to make it automatic, but you don't get precision guard for perfect timing, so just learn the timing. Unless you're me, who's playing the game generally a lot at 3 times speed, because certain characters' rays take 5 billion years for attack animations, so I had to pretty much precision guard as everyone's moving at 3 times speed, because some of the animations can just take a while in this game. You also have the ability to interrupt enemies by having someone in the back row use an item, specifically an item and not a skill, in order to help support the team. So it's also another reason why, if you only have like 2 people in your party, why you may want someone in the back row rather than just doubling up on the front row as well. Common mechanics are tied to be someone in the front and the back as well. So there's just a bunch of stuff. There's also Unity, where essentially is your big going all out mode, where your party will all have their turns, essentially one after the other, and if the character has full AP, they can also unleash a big devastating attack as well. On top of the fact, they can also do the switch out thing to have more characters attack at the same time, and like I said, with the tools they give you, combat can get nuts, and like I said, I love it. On top of the fact, the enemies in this game are generally strong enough to withstand the stuff you're doing, so you do get put an opportunity to experiment with the stuff you have. And when I mention the dimensional paths, there are variants to them that the game chooses later on that can add certain stigmas to them that will then have you change up your combat strategy. So like I said, you do get plenty of time and opportunities to really experiment with the combat mechanics of this game. One thing I also like is the fact that while this game does have a character with a heal ability, they join the party pretty late. So at the fact that they have you instead your main method of healing, bring your items you synthesize, incentivizing you to really get good at synthesizing before they give you a character who then has the ability to heal, which by that point, you could have made items that can heal and also do various other stuff on top of that fact. So that the fact that they don't just give you a healer right off the bat and make you instead work for your heals mid-combat and then give you someone who can just heal heal using a skill, which like I said can be charged through AP, so it's easier to keep using rather than items that have a certain amount of uses per battle. Can't really think of any gripes I have with the combat. I mean, I can think of this one instance where I hit a fight, which clearly the game wanted me to lose because of how powerful the opponent was, and it was essentially a loss that didn't result in a game over. But I decided to retry that fight, rethink my strategy, and this time I actually won. And the cutscene still says I lose because it's a scripted loss, so there's no avoiding it even if you do actually win. But hey, you can win the gameplay, so there's that fact. It's a fight that you're meant to lose, but while you still lose anyway, you can show the game who's boss. You also have a skill tree system that allows you to essentially just upgrade the characters through the skill points you get throughout the game, whether it be from fighting enemies or completing quests and everything. And one thing that while playing this game that got updated to is the fact that if you fully fill out a character skill tree, you then have a secondary skill tree that essentially is just directly upgrading the character's stats using the skill point. One issue I do have with the game is the fact that the characters come in at a certain level, so it means that by the point a character joins a party, they may end up being under level compared to everyone else. I know that once I got my last party member, they were level 35. Meanwhile, my party's average level was in the 50s. Granted, when it comes to Atelier games, it depends more on what kind of items you synthesize, how powerful you make them, more than the character's actual levels and stats. This is one of those things where the character can join and by the time you may be more powerful than the game thought you would be. As for this game's text, you do have the option to increase the text size or make it smaller if you want right off the bat, and the large size is rather large as well and does work for the game, on top of the fact that most of the text generally has a white border around it, making it so that way it doesn't get caught in the background. Although when it comes to the main dialogue text, for some reason they start going transparent on the side, so any text that gets closer to that edge may become harder to read, so that's just a very weird decision when it comes to it. But overall, when it comes to trying to read what the characters are saying, I feel like it's working rather well, although you do have a lot of dialogue that appears on the bottom left of the screen that from a certain distance can be hard to read, especially since the characters, specifically the party members, will interact a lot with each other with that small corner text as well. The major cutscenes also don't have the background, but instead they have the text with a black border and more bold, making it so it still stands out from the background, although there may be certain instances where the text is overlaid on a character's bright clothing that, I said, it's more of a rare instance in this game, but it is still something that could happen. But overall, I definitely feel the text size is improved here from the last game being Atelier Yumiya back in March. Overall, I do enjoy Atelier Resleriana, the Red Alchemist, and the White Guardian. So I enjoy the color system when it comes to the alchemy, and just the fact that you can just get lost for hours, because once you find that one resource that's barring you from going further recipe mores, you can just start going nuts and making more and more stuff, and then buffing it more with the tools you have in the Atelier itself. Running the shop just kind of exists, but hey, it's a great way for the characters to get money so you can further do more alchemy if you want, or buffing stuff, replication. While I do like the fairies from the dungeon, there are so many of them and you can only hire a certain amount. Granted, you don't need that many fairies with you, but just one of those things where they constantly go to the fairy, get the passive buff, and then reject the fairy, to go away. It becomes a thing where it's like, I'm already full, I can't have any more fairies on me, but they will still ask you if you want to have the fairy join anyway, because you can see what stats they got. They can help for your shop, or help for buffing stuff, whichever you choose. While the story itself is a follow-up to the mobile title, you don't need to play it. Like I said twice before, you can't play it anymore with the international version, but I do wish that Resna really had more to do the narrative, considering, like I said, she's supposed to be inspiration for Rias to become an alchemist, but she kind of just leaves the game unless you buy DLC, in which case I guess DLC just doesn't technically happen if she's technically the narrative not supposed to be there. I don't know, it's just a weird decision to have her come in and then walk away and then go, when a supporting member with an extra quest, pay us like $17 more for that. Like, I know it was post-launch DLC, like I said, but it's still a weird decision of a character who doesn't do much in the story and then make them DLC afterwards. So like the interactions the characters have with each other and the events that they dedicate just to have the characters in the town interact with each other and get to the crossover interactions that you want. Granted, there's still many Atelier games I have not played, but it is still a cool thing to include. Granted, when it comes to the characters who are completely off to the side, you don't really get that with them. Hell, they don't even get voice acting. They're just there to have a quest, and then you can pretty much order them to get certain items for you. But the fact that they keep including those characters from previous entries, although it got weird when some of those characters were like protagonists of those entries, and they didn't get voice acting, top billing whatsoever kind of thing. And then certain characters who don't do much in the story, but because they're a legacy character, they get voice acting for a certain story event, they get the voice acting. Like, I don't know, certain characters I feel like they get top billing here when they really shouldn't and just exist like a scene or two, despite being a previous protagonist. Combat system mixing so much stuff from previous entries just really makes it shine, on top of adding its own flair to it, so that way it's not just retrying stuff from the past, but also adding its own special stuff to the game, which I feel highlights the fact that it may be a crossover game, but it still adds enough of its own flair to make its character stand out front and center in this journey and everything. So I gotta say about the game, remember people joked that this game was like a quote-unquote emergency go back button for after Yumiya, even though Yumiya did very well and I like Yumiya, but I would definitely say I do enjoy this game more when it comes to overall everything going on, even if Yumiya had way more fun exploration mechanics, everything. But yeah, people joked about that. It's like, the guys, they can't possibly take feedback that fast. It's coming out this year. This game was announced last year. Just like one of those decisions people had when they said, hey, I'm going to make a console version and a mobile game, but it's its own distinct game, rather than just being a console port of the mobile game. So it's an interesting idea to make a single-player adventure based off of a gacha game and everything that, like I said, you can't play anymore internationally. So I gotta say, alright then, good day.